Hi everybody, Andy here again. Well, the title of this video, if I didn't put up a title already, is the Doomsday Clock and climate change. It sounds a bit nasty, doesn't it? So just a bit of background here. If you don't know what the Doomsday Clock is, just to let you know, it was all in the news last week because they changed the actual time on the Doomsday Clock a bit closer to midnight. So I'll just give you a bit of a clue about what the Doomsday Clock. I've got a little bits of paper here as per normal. The Doomsday Clock is a symbolic clock face which has been maintained since 1947 by the Board of Directors of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists at the University of Chicago in America, of course. It uses the analogy of the human race being at a time that is minutes to midnight, where midnight represents destruction by nuclear war. Since its introduction, the clock has been appeared on the cover of each issue of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. As it says, the number of minutes before midnight is a measure of the degree of nuclear threat, and it's updated periodically. Well, they updated it last week. I think it was the 17th of January. They've obviously had their sort of meeting, and this is part of what they were saying. Experts assessing the dangers posed to civilization have added climate change to the prospect of nuclear annihilation as the greatest threats to humankind. As a result, the group has moved the minute hand of its famous Doomsday Clock 2 minutes closer to midnight. They first did it in 1947, obviously after the Second World War, when we had the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that sort of set the world on an upward spiral, I suppose, of the potential of destruction because of atomic wars. And the clock's actually been changed about 18 times ever since. I've got a couple of figures here. The closest it ever got to midnight, and therefore the closest that people thought we were ever going to get to sort of nuclear destruction, all-out nuclear war, was in 1953. I mean, it was at 2 minutes to midnight, and anyone who knows Iron Maiden, the band Iron Maiden, might know one of their songs called 2 Minutes to Midnight. That's where they got the idea from, and that was straight after the US and Russia had done some hydrogen bomb tests. So it's not just the atomic bombs, and then went on to hydrogen bombs. The furthest away it's been was in 1991. So the Berlin Wall came down, and sort of East and West had better relations. The Cold War more or less disappeared. Lots of strategic arms reduction treaties and things like that, and it went to 17 minutes away from midnight then. So 17 minutes, and now we're at 5 minutes to midnight. So in that sort of 15 years, we've gone from a situation where everything was seemed to be nice and happy and smiling, and we're now at we've gone 12 minutes in the space of 15 years. I know it's only an analogy and it's only an idea, but obviously one of the things they're talking about now is nuclear sort of proliferation across the world, whether it be in Asia with India and Pakistan, those sort of places over there. You've also got North Korea, obviously, and you've got Iran, and obviously places like Israel have got their own bombs, so there's that potential there as well. Now, the reason they've added climate change this time, and it's, as you may know, it's a subject that I've dealt with before. I did a video called global warming a while ago, so if you want to check that one out as well, I'll give you some idea of what I'm talking about here and some of my opinions on that subject, I suppose. But bringing climate change in, because the nuclear analogy with the nuclear war, one of the reasons that they're talking about it is because of the way it destroys the world. It's not necessarily the actual the war itself, is what comes afterwards, and the fact that the landscape obviously is completely destroyed, as we saw in the sort of horrible pictures from Hiroshima especially, but Nagasaki as well, back in 1945, I think it was, wasn't it? 1945 August. And so that's what they're talking about, and they now think that climate change has the potential to be as catastrophic as the atomic bombs were there, wiping out complete areas, whether it be by drought, flooding or whatever. Now, I don't know if they have thought about this, but I think that there's actually a big tie-up, apart from the fact that they have the same outcome, I suppose. A nuclear war would change the climate as well, but climate change would also change the world as it was, and it already is possibly as well. I know lots of people disagree, but no, I'm not going to go down that road. If you disagree, that's absolutely fine. I have no problem with that, but watch my other video for my points about that. But my point of view in this one is that because of the way climate change is expected to happen, some of these places that have got bombs nowadays, especially in Asia, the Middle East, that is the area where conflict is more likely to happen nowadays than it ever was. So, and especially with climate change, we've got political situations out there, of course we have, and we all know too well about what's happening in that sort of part of the world nowadays. But everybody seems to think, or the big minds in the world seem to think that the next great wars that we have, if we have some sort of big wars that are really going to start engulfing everybody, it won't necessarily be about land, it will probably be about water. And obviously climate change has a great deal to say about water supplies. I know we're probably going to be swamped by water in some parts of the world because of melting ice caps, but in other parts of the world there'll be more desertification, for example, even in Europe for that matter, and certainly in the US, but definitely in Africa and in the Middle East and Asia as well for that matter. And it's already started. The Dead Sea and places like that are drying up, so people have got to get their water from somewhere. And they're already talking about diverting rivers, like the River Nile, I think, which is a very, very long river. Now, it sort of starts in the Ethiopian islands, I believe, and it goes a hell of a long way before it gets to Egypt. Now, if someone starts tapping into that water supply, so it doesn't actually feed the Egyptians, and anyone who's been to Egypt, and I've been lucky enough to go there, will know that it's been called the gift of the Nile for very good reasons. They need that water, so it's a potential flashpoint for that side of it. Anyway, people, if they lose their water, that could start a war as well. Obviously, the other problem is, as I said, with deserts encroaching on the land, so people will start migrating. They would also start migrating because their land has been flooded, so they will start migrating into other countries. And I can see the sort of a connection between the two, the sort of nuclear wars and the climate change, because I can see the wars escalating and people will actually use nuclear weapons during those wars as the sort of ultimate sanction, isn't it? I'd like to think that anybody that does have a nuclear weapon will never use it, because we all know that, and I would have thought people were sensible enough to realise that if you do use one, bang goes your country. And so why do we need thousands and thousands of them? But that's another story anyway. But I just thought I'd put that, just that little connection, just in case nobody else has thought of it. I'm sure loads of people already have. So although they're two sort of separate subjects, I feel that the two could really come into clash one of these days, when everybody starts moving around, stealing people's water, or what people think is their water, and that's where the wars are going to come from in the future. Migration is already happening here in Europe. People leaving Africa, they're economic migrants, but we're going to have climate change migrants in the not too distant future as well. If all these places, Bangladesh, low-lying countries as well, are going to be completely flooded, those people have got to go somewhere, haven't they? So they will be taking the food and the land and the water of other places as well. So that's where I see the conflicts coming in the future. But I hope this has made sense. I'm sure someone else has thought about it. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that up. Thanks for your time. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.